The ATM screen flickered, casting a sickly blue light across Arthur Henderson's trembling hands. At 72 years old, his fingers weren't as steady as they used to be, fumbling with the crisp bills that emerged from the machine. $300. His granddaughter Emma's birthday money. She'd be turning 8 next week, and he'd promised her that bicycle with the pink streamers she'd been begging for. Well, a voice cut through the night air like a rusty blade. Look what we got here, boys. Late-night shopping trip, old man. Arthur's heart seized in his chest, for shadows detached themselves from the darkness of the alley beside the bank, moving with the predatory confidence of wolves who'd found a wounded deer. The leader, a young man with a spiderweb tattoo crawling up his neck, stepped into the blue light, a switchblade dancing between his fingers. Please, Arthur stammered, his back pressing against the cold brick wall of the bank. His war veteran hands, once steady enough to field strip a rifle in 30 seconds, now clutched the money to his chest like a shield made of paper. Take the money. Just don't hurt me. Rico, that's what his crew called him, laughed. It was a sharp, cruel sound that echoed off the empty storefronts lining the street. His 3 companions joined in, a chorus of hyenas surrounding a lion too old to roar. Oh, we're definitely gonna take the cash, Pops, Rico sneered, flicking the switchblade open with practiced ease. The click of the blade locking into place sounded like a death sentence in the quiet night. But the beating? He stepped closer, his breath reeking of cheap beer and cheaper cigarettes. That's free of charge. Consider it a public service, teaching you not to flash money around in our neighborhood. The other 3 closed ranks, forming a semicircle of malice. Marcus, the muscle, cracked his knuckles. Dante spat on the pavement. Little Jay, who wasn't little at all, pulled a length of chain from his jacket pocket, letting it dangle with a metallic whisper that promised pain. Arthur squeezed his eyes shut, his mind flashing to Emma's face, to his late wife Mary, to the Purple Heart gathering dust in his dresser drawer. He'd survived Kandahar. He'd survived burying his wife. But he wouldn't survive this. Not at his age. Not against 4 young men who saw violence as entertainment. He waited for the first blow, his entire body tensing. It never came. Instead, the ground beneath his feet began to vibrate. A low, guttural rumble, like a dragon waking in the depths of a cave, filled the air. The vibration traveled up through the concrete, through Rico's sneakers, up his legs, and froze him mid-step. The laughter died on his lips. A single headlight cut through the darkness behind the 4 thugs, brilliant and blinding as a searchlight. The rumble grew into a roar, the unmistakable thunder of a big twin-cylinder engine that announced its presence like a warlord entering a conquered city. Then, abruptly, the engine cut. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise, pregnant with violence yet to be born. Rico spun around, squinting into the light. He could make out the silhouette of a motorcycle, massive, custom-built, chrome gleaming like teeth in the darkness. And sitting astride it, a figure that seemed carved from the same metal as the machine. A voice emerged from behind that blinding light, deep as gravel tumbling in a cement mixer, cold as a grave in winter. I suggest you put that money back in the gentleman's pocket, before I fold you in half and put you in it. Axel Sledge, Thorne killed the headlight with a deliberate movement, plunging the alley back into the blue half-light of the ATM. He kicked the kickstand down. The metallic clang echoed like a church bell tolling the hour of judgment, and dismounted with a slow, terrifying grace that made every movement a threat. At 6'5" and 240 pounds of muscle, scar tissue, and barely contained fury, Sledge didn't walk so much as he prowled. His leather cut, the sacred vest of the Iron Reapers Motorcycle Club, bore the patches of a man who'd earned his place at the table through blood, brotherhood, and an uncompromising code that put loyalty above all else. The skull and reaper patch on his back seemed to glow in the darkness, a promise of death to those who crossed the wrong line. His face was a roadmap of violence survived. A broken nose that had healed crooked, a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, another running from his jaw to his ear. His hands, when he cracked his knuckles, bore the scars of 100 fights and the heavy silver rings of a man who knew how to make his fists hurt even more. The sound of those knuckles cracking was like pistol shots in the silent street. Rico tried to muster his courage, the switchblade trembling in his hand. He'd grown up in these streets. He'd made a name for himself, taking from the weak, from the people who couldn't fight back. Nobody challenged him here. Nobody dared. Stay back, biker. Rico's voice cracked slightly, betraying his fear. This don't concern you. We're just having a conversation with. You're robbing an old man, Sledge interrupted, his voice a rumble that seemed to come from the earth itself. He took a step forward, and the four thugs instinctively took a step back. In my alley. On my street. In my goddamn neighborhood. Another step. Another retreat. That makes it very much my concern. Marcus, the largest of the thugs, tried to salvage the situation. There's four of us, man. And just one of. He never finished the sentence. Sledge closed the distance between them in two massive strides. Marcus swung wild, a haymaker that might have worked in a bar fight against someone his own size. Sledge didn't even try to block it. He leaned back slightly, letting the fist pass harmlessly by his face, then grabbed Marcus by the collar and the belt. What happened next would be talked about on these streets for years. Sledge lifted Marcus, all 200 pounds of him, clean off the ground and threw him into the nearest dumpster like a bag of trash. The impact was tremendous, the crash of metal and Marcus's scream of surprise echoing off the buildings. The dumpster lid slammed shut on Marcus's legs, trapping him half in, half out. Dante ran. No pride, no loyalty, just pure animal survival instinct. He made it maybe 10 feet before Sledge's hand clamped down on his shoulder and spun him around. Sledge's forehead connected with Dante's nose with a wet crunch, and Dante crumpled like a puppet with cut strings. Little J swung his chain, the metal whipping through the air with a lethal whistle. Sledge caught the chain in mid-swing, his gloved hand closing around it, and yanked hard. Little J, still gripping the other end, flew forward off balance. Sledge's other fist came up in an uppercut that lifted Little J's feet clear off the ground before he collapsed in a groaning heap. 7 seconds. That's how long it took Sledge to dismantle 3 armed thugs. Rico stood frozen, the switchblade shaking so badly in his hand it was making a rattling sound. His eyes, wide with terror, darted between his fallen crew and the mountain of a man standing before him. Your turn, Sledge said quietly, cracking his neck to one side, then the other. Rico lunged in desperation, the knife aimed at Sledge's midsection, a wild, amateur move born of panic rather than skill. Sledge caught Rico's wrist mid-thrust, his hand closing around it like a vice. He didn't just stop the attack, he immobilized it completely, as if Rico's arm had been set in concrete. Sledge leaned in close, his face inches from Rico's terrified eyes. Up close, Rico could see the death in those eyes, not the threat of death, but death itself, patient and waiting. Drop it, Sledge whispered. The knife clattered to the pavement. Sledge twisted Rico's arm behind his back, not hard enough to break, but hard enough to promise he could, and walked him over to where Arthur still stood pressed against the wall, his hands full of crumpled money. Apologize, Sledge commanded. I am sorry. I'm so sorry, old man. Please, I didn't mean. Pick up his money. The bills you knocked out of his hands. Rico, tears streaming down his face now, scrambled to collect the scattered 20s and 10s from the dirty pavement. His hands shook so badly he dropped them twice before finally pressing them into Arthur's palm. Now run, Sledge suggested, releasing his grip. Before I change my mind about letting you keep your legs. Rico ran. He didn't look back, didn't check on his crew, didn't stop running until he was 6 blocks away and his lungs were burning. Sledge watched him go, then turned his attention to the other 3. Marcus had extracted himself from the dumpster and was limping away. Dante, blood streaming from his broken nose, dragged Little J to his feet, and the two of them stumbled off into the darkness, supporting each other. Only then did Sledge turn to Arthur, and when he did, something remarkable happened. The death in his eyes softened. The hard lines of his face relaxed into something almost gentle. He crouched down, making himself smaller, less threatening, and picked up a $20 bill that had blown against the ATM machine. He smoothed it carefully, pressing out the wrinkles against his thigh, and held it out to Arthur with a respect that bordered on reverence. I believe this is yours, sir, Sledge said, his voice stripped of its earlier menace. Arthur took the bill with trembling fingers, his heart still hammering against his ribs like it was trying to escape. He looked up at this massive man who'd materialized from the night like an avenging angel, and something in his teacher's brain, the part that never forgot a face, even after 40 years in the classroom, sparked with recognition. The eyes. Even under all that scar tissue, all that beard, all those hard years that had carved this man from the boy he'd once been, the eyes were the same. Gray-blue, like storm clouds over the ocean. Eyes that had once looked up at him from the back row of American history, sullen and defensive and drowning in the kind of pain that comes from a home where love is rationed and violence is plenty. Axel. Arthur's voice was barely a whisper. Axel Thorne, is that you? The massive biker's expression shifted through surprise, then something that might have been embarrassment, before settling on a smile that transformed his face from terrifying to merely formidable. Hello, Mr. Henderson, Sledge said, and for just a moment, Arthur could hear the echo of the angry 15-year-old who'd sat in his classroom, convinced the world had nothing good to offer him. Sorry I'm late with my homework. A laugh burst from Arthur's chest, part relief, part joy, part the slightly hysterical release of surviving what he'd been certain would be his last night on Earth. 30 years late, if I'm counting correctly. Give or take. Sledge stood to his full height and extended his hand. Arthur shook it, feeling the calluses, the scars, the raw strength tempered by surprising gentleness. You okay, sir? Did they hurt you? No, you arrived just in time. Arthur looked down at the money in his hands, then back up at the man who'd once been his most challenging student. I can't believe. Axel Thorne, the boy who wrote that essay on the Battle of Thermopylae, do you remember? The 300 Spartans? You said you understood why they stood their ground, why they didn't run. Against impossible odds, Sledge finished, the memory clearly still fresh in his mind. You gave me an A+. First one I'd ever gotten in any class. You earned it. That essay showed me you understood what it meant to stand for something, even when standing meant falling. Arthur's eyes grew misty. I always wondered what happened to you after you graduated. Well, after you barely graduated because I may have fudged your attendance record. Sledge laughed, a genuine sound of warmth. I know you did, sir. Principal Mahoney told me years later when I came back to thank you. But you'd already retired. You came back. Twice. You were the only teacher who didn't give up on me. The only one who looked past the bruises my old man gave me and saw. Something worth saving, I guess. Sledge gestured to his cut, to the motorcycle gleaming in the shadows. This might not be the life you'd have chosen for me, but it's honest work. We look after our own. We protect our neighborhood. We stand our ground. Like the Spartans, Arthur said softly. Like the Spartans. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the violence of minutes ago already fading into the past. Finally, Arthur glanced at his watch and sighed. I should get home. My son's probably wondering where I am. I just needed to get this money for Emma's birthday present. Your granddaughter? Yes. You remember me talking about my grandson? Well, that's Emily's boy, and now he's got a daughter of his own. Time flies in the strangest ways. Sledge walked Arthur to his car, a 15-year-old Buick sedan that had seen better decades. He waited until Arthur was safely inside, the doors locked, the engine running. Mr. Henderson, Sledge said through the window. You still live over on Birch Street? The little blue house with the cherry tree in front. The same one. How did you? I know every street in this neighborhood, sir. Every house where good people live. Every corner where bad people operate. His expression hardened slightly. Those punks who try to rob you? They're not from around here. They've been moving in over the past few weeks, thinking they can set up shop on my streets. He shook his head. I'll be having a conversation with them. A longer one. You understand. Axel, please don't do anything that'll get you in trouble on my account. Sir, with all due respect, you taught me that some things are worth fighting for. That standing your ground isn't about being the biggest or the strongest. It's about knowing what's right and having the spine to defend it. Sledge tapped the roof of the car gently. You get home safe. Lock your doors. And if you see those four again, or anyone else giving you trouble, you call me. He pulled a business card from his wallet, surprisingly professional looking, with the Iron Reaper's logo and a phone number. Day or night, sir. You call, and I'll answer. Arthur took the card with shaking hands. Thank you, Axel. Thank you for remembering your old teacher. For being there tonight. Always, Mr. Henderson. You were there for me when nobody else was. That's a debt I'll spend the rest of my life trying to repay. Arthur drove away, checking his rearview mirror to see Sledge standing in the glow of the streetlight, watching until the Buick turned the corner and disappeared from sight. Only then did Sledge pull out his phone and dial a number he knew by heart. "Reaper," answered a gravelly voice on the other end. "It's Sledge. Get the boys together. We need to have a talk about some new players in the neighborhood who don't understand the rules." "How serious?" Sledge thought about Arthur's trembling hands, the terror in his eyes, the way Rico had laughed at an old man's fear. He thought about all the other people in this neighborhood, the shopkeepers, the single mothers, the veterans, the good people just trying to live their lives. Who might be next if these punks weren't dealt with? "Serious enough," he said. "Church is in session tomorrow night. Pass the word." Rico didn't stop running until his lungs burned and his legs felt like water. He finally collapsed behind a dumpster 6 blocks away, gasping for air, his mind replaying the humiliation in sharp, painful detail. The way that biker had tossed Marcus like he weighed nothing. The casual violence, the absolute confidence. The way Rico himself had cried in front of his crew. His phone buzzed, then buzzed again, and again. "Marcus. Bro, where TF are you? Little J, my head is bleeding. Dante. Nose is broken, I'm going to the hospital." Rico stared at the messages, shame burning in his gut like acid. He was supposed to be the leader, the one who made the calls, who took the risks, who commanded respect through fear. But he'd folded like a cheap suit the second real trouble showed up. He needed backup. He needed someone who'd make that biker regret putting hands on Rico's crew. He needed someone who wouldn't ask too many questions about why 4 armed men had gotten demolished by one unarmed biker. He needed his cousin. Vincent Viper Morales operated out of a nightclub called Serpent's Den on the east side of the city, technically outside Iron Reaper's territory, but close enough that there'd been friction before. Viper ran drugs, guns, and girls with the efficient brutality of a businessman who'd learned his trade in Tijuana before bringing it north. He was smart, connected, and absolutely ruthless when it came to disrespect. Rico caught an Uber to the club, ignoring the driver's concerned questions about his disheveled appearance. By the time he arrived, he'd constructed a version of events that painted him in a much better light. Less ran away crying, and more tactical retreat in the face of overwhelming numbers. The bouncer at Serpent's Den, a walking mountain named Hector, recognized Rico and waved him through without question. Inside, the club pulsed with reggaeton and the smell of expensive cologne mixed with cheaper perfume. Viper's private booth was in the back, elevated slightly, so he could survey his kingdom. At 35, Viper had the lean, dangerous look of a knife that had been sharpened too many times. His arms were covered in tattoos that told the story of his rise through the ranks. Prison ink mixed with expensive artwork from artists who specialized in criminal clientele. His eyes, when they fixed on Rico limping toward him, held the flat, reptilian patience of his namesake. "Primo," Viper said, waving away the 2 women who'd been draped across him like accessories. "You look like shit. Who did this?" Rico slumped into the booth, grateful for the darkness that hid the worst of his shame. "Some bikers. Iron Reapers. They jumped us out of nowhere, said we were operating on their turf without permission." This was the lie Rico had settled on. Not 4-on-1 humiliation at the hands of a single man, but an unfair ambush by a larger force. There were like 10 of them, Viper. They came out of nowhere, said we needed to pay tribute to operate in that neighborhood or get out. When we refused, they beat the hell out of us. Viper's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. "Iron Reapers. That's Sledge's crew, right? The big pendejo with the attitude." "Yeah, he was there, leading them, talking all this trash about respect and territory," and Rico's voice cracked slightly. He was too deep in the lie now to back out. "They said we were nothing, that this whole area belongs to them, and we're just guests who can be evicted anytime." The lie worked because it contained just enough truth. The Iron Reapers did consider this neighborhood their territory. Sledge had made it clear that Rico and his crew weren't welcome. The details about numbers and circumstances were just creative embellishment. Viper was silent for a long moment, swirling the whiskey in his glass. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, which anyone who knew him understood was far more dangerous than shouting. "They put hands on my blood," he said softly. "They disrespected my family in front of witnesses. They think they can just roll up and claim streets that don't belong to them. He looked up at Rico, his eyes burning with cold fury. This is about respect, Primo. We let this slide, and everyone thinks we're soft. Every crew from here to the border will think they can push us around. So what do? Viper smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. We send a message. Not to Sledge directly, not yet. We find out what he cares about, and we hurt that. Make him understand that there are consequences for stepping to us. How do we find out what he cares about? Easy. Bikers like that. They're predictable. They care about 3 things. Their bikes, their brothers, and their neighborhood. Viper pulled out his phone and scrolled through contacts. We've got people who live around there. Someone will have seen him, talked to him, knows who he protects. Within an hour, Viper had his answer. One of his street-level dealers, a kid named Tommy who sold weed to college students and kept his ear to the ground, reported back about the incident at the ATM. About Sledge protecting some old man. About the old man's car, parked at a blue house on Birch Street. An old man, Viper mused, pulling up Google Street View on his phone and zooming in on Arthur's address. Sledge played hero for some random viejo. That's sweet. That's touching. He looked up at Rico. That's leverage. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that old man has a car. And cars burn really well. Viper made a call. Memo? Yeah, it's Viper. I need you and Carlos to handle something for me tonight. Birch Street, blue house with the cherry tree. There's a Buick in the driveway. I want it to burn. No, don't touch the house. We're not trying to kill anyone. Just the car. Send a message that nobody's protected, that playing hero has consequences. He hung up and turned back to Rico. Tomorrow morning, that viejo wakes up to a pile of ashes. Sledge hears about it and knows we can reach anyone he protects. And then we negotiate from a position of strength. Rico felt a flutter of unease. This wasn't what he'd expected. He'd wanted Viper to help them save face, maybe rough up a few reapers, not escalate to property destruction. But he was too deep in the lie to back out now, and besides, his pride was still stinging from the humiliation. What if Sledge retaliates? Viper laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Primo, let him. The Iron Reapers are a small-time MC playing at being tough. We've got connections they can't imagine, suppliers, enforcers, lawyers who can make problems disappear. Sledge wants a war. He raised his glass in a mock toast. We'll give him a war. And we'll bury him and his whole club in the process. Arthur Henderson slept poorly that night, his dreams haunted by switchblades and shadows. He woke several times in a cold sweat, his heart racing, reaching for the baseball bat he'd kept beside his bed since Mary passed. Each time, he'd remind himself that he was safe, that Axel Thorne, Sledge, had saved him, that those thugs were probably still running. But still, the fear lingered like a bad taste. He finally gave up on sleep around 5:30 a.m. and shuffled to the kitchen to make coffee. Through the window above the sink, he could see his Buick in the driveway, faithful and familiar. That car had been with him for 15 years, had driven his granddaughter to school, had taken him to Mary's funeral, had been the one constant in a life marked by loss and change. The coffee was just starting to brew when he heard the sound. At first, he thought it was a backfire from someone's car, a sharp crack that echoed through the quiet suburban morning. But then came the whoosh, the sound of flame catching hold, and the orange glow that lit up his kitchen window like a false dawn. Arthur ran to the front door, his old knees protesting every step. He flung it open and stopped dead, his mind struggling to process what his eyes were showing him. His car was on fire. Not just smoking, not just a small blaze in the engine compartment. The entire vehicle was engulfed in flames that reached 15 feet into the air, the heat so intense he could feel it from his porch. The cherry tree that Mary had planted 20 years ago was starting to char on the side nearest the car. No, Arthur whispered, then louder, no. He ran back inside for his phone, dialing 911 with shaking fingers. Fire. My car, please send the fire department. 1247, Birch Street, please hurry. His neighbors were emerging from their houses now, drawn by the light and the smell of burning rubber and gasoline. Mrs. Chun from across the street came running with her garden hose, but the fire was already too intense. They could only watch as 15 years of memories turned to ash and twisted metal. The fire department arrived 8 minutes later. By then, the car was a total loss, a blackened skeleton sitting on melted tires in a pool of charred driveway. The firefighters saved the cherry tree, but just barely. Its leaves on one side were brown and withered from the heat. Mr. Henderson? The fire marshal, a woman named Captain Rodriguez, approached him as he sat on his porch steps, wrapped in a blanket one of the paramedics had provided even though it wasn't cold. Can you tell me what happened? I don't know. I woke up, heard a noise, and my car was on fire. Any chance you left something flammable in the vehicle? Old batteries, oily rags. No, nothing. I'm very careful about that. Captain Rodriguez exchanged glances with one of her crew. Mr. Henderson, I'm going to be straight with you. This wasn't an accident. See that burn pattern? She pointed to the remains of his car. That's consistent with an accelerant, probably a Molotov cocktail or something similar. Someone deliberately set fire to your car. Arthur's hands began to shake. Why? Why would someone do that? But even as he asked, he knew. Those 4 thugs from last night. Or whoever they worked for. This was retaliation for what Sledge had done, a message that they could reach him anytime they wanted. Is there anyone who might have a grudge against you? Anyone you've had conflict with recently? Before Arthur could answer, another engine rumble filled the street. Deeper, more powerful than the fire trucks. A motorcycle, chrome gleaming in the early morning light, pulled up to the curb. Sledge dismounted in one fluid motion, his face a mask of controlled fury as he took in the scene. Mr. Henderson. He crossed the lawn in long strides, ignoring the fire marshal's attempt to stop him. Sir, are you hurt? Are you okay? I'm fine. I'm fine, Arthur assured him, though his voice shook. Just the car. They burned my car. Sledge looked at the smoking wreckage, and something terrible passed across his face. A promise of violence so intense that even the fire marshal took a step back. Sir, do you know this man? Rodriguez asked Arthur. Yes, he's a former student. Arthur started to explain. I'm the one they're really after. Sledge interrupted, his voice tight. Mr. Henderson, I am so sorry. This is my fault. I should have known they'd try something like this. Wait, you know who did this? Rodriguez's hand moved toward her radio. Yeah, local punks who thought they could run protection rackets in this neighborhood. I discouraged them last night. Guess they decided to send a message. Sledge pulled out his phone. I'm calling this into my crew. We'll handle it. No, sir, you won't, Rodriguez said firmly. This is arson, possibly attempted murder if they thought Mr. Henderson might be in the car. This is a matter for the police. Sledge's jaw clenched, but Arthur could see him forcing himself to stay calm. You're right. Of course. I'll cooperate fully with whatever the police need. But his eyes, those storm cloud eyes, promised that cooperation with the police wouldn't be the end of it. Not by a long shot. The police arrived 20 minutes later, took statements, collected evidence. They found traces of the Molotov cocktail, a beer bottle that hadn't completely shattered, fragments of cloth that had been used as a wick. One of the officers mentioned they'd check for fingerprints, but everyone knew the chances were slim. Through it all, Sledge stayed with Arthur. He called the paramedics over when he noticed Arthur's breathing getting shallow and rapid, the old man's hand pressed to his chest. Sir? Mr. Henderson, talk to me. Just chest pains. Probably just stress. Arthur's face went gray. Heart attack. Sledge snapped to the nearest paramedic. He's having a heart attack. Move. The next 15 minutes were a blur of sirens and urgent voices. The paramedics got Arthur stabilized, an oxygen mask over his face, and 4 in his arm, loaded onto a stretcher. Sledge rode with him in the ambulance, holding his hand, talking to him in a calm, steady voice that cut through the panic. You're going to be fine, sir. These guys are professionals. They've got you. Just breathe, nice and slow. Remember what you taught us in class about staying calm under pressure? About how fear is just adrenaline and you can control it. Well, now's the time to use it. Just breathe. At the hospital, they wheeled Arthur straight to the cardiac unit. Sledge was forced to wait in the lobby, pacing like a caged animal, his hands clenched into fists. Other people in the waiting room gave him a wide berth, this massive, scarred biker radiating barely controlled violence. His phone rang. Sledge, he answered. Boss, it's Reaper. Heard about what happened. How's the old man? In surgery. They think he'll make it, but... Sledge's voice cracked slightly. Reaper, they burned his car while he was in the house. If the fire had spread, if the tree had caught, the whole house could have gone up with him in it. Jesus. I want everyone at the clubhouse. Tonight. No exceptions. We're going to find out who ordered this, and we're going to end them. Already on it, boss. Got gears pulling surveillance footage from every camera within 6 blocks of Henderson's place. We'll find them. Good. Because this isn't just about respect anymore. This isn't about territory. They went after a defenseless old man because they were pissed at me. That's a line you don't cross. He stopped, forcing himself to breathe. Just get everyone together. Church is in session at sundown. He hung up and slumped into one of the plastic chairs, his head in his hands. A nurse approached cautiously. Are you family? Close as, Sledge said. How is he? Stable. The doctor will be out to talk to you soon. But it looks like he's going to pull through. He's strong for his age. He's the strongest man I know, Sledge said quietly. The bravest too. Took a scared, angry kid who everyone else had written off and made him believe he could be something more than his old man's punching bag. The nurse's expression softened. Was he your teacher? The only one who mattered. 2 hours later, the doctor emerged with good news. Arthur had suffered a mild heart attack, brought on by stress and shock, but he'd responded well to treatment. He'd need to stay for observation, would need to make some lifestyle changes, but he was expected to make a full recovery. Can I see him? Briefly. He's still groggy, but he's been asking for someone named Axel. Sledge followed the doctor to Arthur's room. The old man looked small in the hospital bed, tubes and wires connecting him to machines that beeped and hummed. But his eyes were clear when they focused on Sledge. Axel, he whispered. You stayed. Of course I stayed, sir. Sledge pulled a chair up beside the bed. I'm not going anywhere until you're back on your feet. My car. I'll get you a new one. Better one. That's not what matters right now. Arthur's hand found Sledge's, gripping it with surprising strength. The people who did this, you're going to go after them, aren't you? Sledge met his eyes, and the old teacher saw the same determined student who'd once written about Spartans standing their ground. Yes, sir. I am. Don't do anything that'll put you in prison, Axel. Please. I didn't save you from your father just to lose you to the system. I'll be smart about it, Sledge promised. But I can't let this slide, Mr. Henderson. You know I can't. If they think they can burn out good people to send me a message, then every person in that neighborhood is in danger. Every shopkeeper, every family, every person who just wants to live their life in peace. Arthur was quiet for a long moment. Like Thermopylae, he finally said. Sir, the Spartans. They knew they probably wouldn't survive, but they stood anyway because someone had to. Because if they didn't, then evil would just keep marching forward unopposed. His grip tightened on Sledge's hand. Just come back, Axel. When it's done, come back and tell me about it. Let me know my student made the right choice. I will, sir. I promise. Sledge stayed until Arthur fell asleep, then made his way out of the hospital and back to his bike. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of blood and fire. He pulled out his phone and sent a group message to the Iron Reapers. Church. Now. War Council. Then he climbed on his bike, fired up the engine that sounded like thunder, and headed for the clubhouse. Behind him, the last light of day died, and the city prepared for the kind of darkness that comes when good men decide they've had enough. The Iron Reapers Motorcycle Club's headquarters sat on the edge of Industrial District, a converted warehouse that had once stored automotive parts and now stored something far more dangerous. Brotherhood forged in chrome and leather, bound by loyalty that ran deeper than blood. By the time Sledge arrived, the parking lot was already filling up with motorcycles. His brothers had come from across the city, dropping whatever they were doing when the call went out. That's what separated a real MC from a gang of weekend warriors. When one of them called for help, the others answered. No questions, no hesitation. Sledge walked through the main bay, past the lift where Gears spent his days rebuilding engines, past the poker table where money changed hands every Friday night, past the memorial wall covered with photos of brothers who died and the creed that bound them all. We stand for the few against the many. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. We are the shield against the darkness, and we do not yield. The church, what outsiders would call a conference room, but what meant so much more to the club, was in the back. It was a sacred space where decisions were made, where justice was dispensed, where the future of the club was debated and determined. A long oak table dominated the center, surrounded by chairs that had been sat in by every member who'd ever worn the patch. At the head of the table sat Sledge's chair, taller than the others, its back carved with the club's symbol. He took his seat and looked around at the men who'd become his family when his blood family had failed him. Reaper, his VP, sat to his right. 50 years old, covered in prison tattoos, a man who'd done 20 years for killing his daughter's rapist and never once expressed regret. He ran the club's security operations with military precision learned in 2 tours of Iraq. Gears, the sergeant-at-arms, was on the left, a mechanical genius who could rebuild any engine blindfolded and had been known to use a torque wrench as a weapon when negotiations failed. Around the table sat 15 more: Diesel, Wraith, Hangman, Ghost, Knuckles, Phoenix, Chains, Razor, Smoke, Junkyard, Preacher, Ace, Bulldog, Savage, and Nomad. Each man with his own story, his own scars, his own reasons for choosing this life, but united in the belief that strength meant nothing if it wasn't used to protect the weak. "Brothers," Sledge began, his voice carrying the weight of command, "thank you for coming. I know some of you had to leave work, leave family, but this couldn't wait." He told them everything. About Arthur Henderson, the teacher who'd saved his life. About the robbery attempt. About the fire. About the heart attack. "They tried to kill a 72-year-old man to send me a message," Sledge said, his hands flat on the table, fighting to keep his voice level. "An innocent man who never hurt anyone, who spent his life educating kids nobody else gave a damn about. They burned his car, nearly killed him, because they were mad at me." The room erupted in angry voices, men shouting over each other, fists slamming on the table. "Who did it? Where are they? Say the word, Sledge. We'll burn their whole world down." Reaper stood, and the room fell silent. He had that kind of presence, calm authority earned through decades of hard living and harder decisions. "What do we know?" he asked. Gears pulled out a laptop and connected it to the TV mounted on the wall. Pulled footage from 3 different sources. Traffic camera at the intersection near Henderson's house caught this. The video showed a dark sedan, probably a Honda, maybe 10 years old, cruising past Arthur's house at 4:47 a.m. It circled the block once, then parked 3 houses down. 2 men got out, their faces obscured by hoodies. One carried something that glinted in the streetlight. "Beer bottle," Gears said, zooming in. "Classic Molotov." They watched as the 2 figures approached Arthur's driveway, moving with the casual confidence of people who thought they were safe. One threw the bottle. It shattered against the Buick's windshield, and flames immediately engulfed the car. The 2 men jogged back to the sedan and drove off. "License plate?" Sledge asked. "Stolen tags. But I got something better." Gears switched to another camera angle. This one from a doorbell camera 2 houses down. "Facial recognition ain't perfect, but I ran what we got through our database." The image on screen showed one of the arsonists more clearly. Gears pulled up a comparison photo. Same man, different angle, from a social media profile. Carlos Mendez, 23 years old, known associate of Vincent "Viper" Morales. The name hit the room like a bomb. "Viper," Reaper said slowly. "The drug dealer who's been trying to expand into our territory?" "The same," Sledge confirmed. "Been hearing rumors he's pushing product on our streets, running girls out of that club of his. I was planning to have a conversation with him eventually, but now it's personal." Chains finished. He was the club's enforcer, a man who'd earned his name by wrapping a chain around a rival gang member's neck and dragging him for 6 blocks behind his bike. "So what's the play?" Sledge looked around the table at his brothers. "This is bigger than just payback. Viper sent his people to burn an old man's car. What's next? Does he start torching businesses who won't pay protection? Does he burn out families who complain about dealers on their corners? Do we wait until someone dies before we act?" "No," the room answered in unison. "Then we end this. Not just Viper, his whole operation. We find out where he operates, who he works with, what keeps his empire running. And then we dismantle it, piece by piece, until there's nothing left but ashes and regret." Preacher, an ex-military chaplain who'd found his calling in the club after the army didn't want him anymore, raised his hand. "Sledge, I'm with you. We all are. But we need to be smart. Viper's connected. He's got cartel ties, political protection. If we go at him wrong, we could bring heat down on the whole club." "Which is why we don't go at him wrong," Sledge said. "We do this clean. We hit him where it hurts, his money, his reputation, his product. We make him untouchable to his suppliers and unprotected by his bought and paid for cops. And then, when he's isolated and desperate, we have a conversation about the price of threatening our neighborhood. Reaper pulled up a map on the screen. Viper operates out of Serpent's Den, that nightclub on East 14th. He uses it as a front, money laundering, distribution hub, office space. Most of his operations run through there. What kind of security we talking about? Diesel asked. He was the club's demolitions expert, useful skills from his days as a Navy SEAL, before a dishonorable discharge for insubordination ended his military career. Armed guards at the doors, cameras everywhere, panic button wired directly to his dirty cops. Reaper shook his head. Place is a fortress during operating hours. Operating hours, Sledge repeated. What about when it's closed? Skeleton crew. 2, maybe 3 guards. Cleaning staff. That's it. Sledge smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Then we pay him a visit when he's not expecting it. We find out who ordered the hit on Arthur. We get evidence of Viper's operations. And we make sure he understands that our neighborhood is off limits. When? Gears asked. Sledge checked his watch. It was 8:47 p.m. on a Wednesday. The club would be closing soon, the legitimate business winding down for the night. Tomorrow morning, 3 a.m. We move in teams. Gears, you're on electronic security. Diesel, you handle any locks or barriers. Reaper, you coordinate from outside. Everyone else, with me. What about weapons? Wraith asked. He was the youngest member of the club, only 25, but he'd earned his patch by single-handedly fighting off 6 gang members who tried to jump him during his prospect period. No guns, Sledge said firmly. This isn't war, it's a message. We go in with bats, chains, knuckles. Old school. If anyone pulls a gun on us, you're authorized to disarm them, but we're not looking to stack bodies. We're looking to scare them straight. The room nodded. This was the difference between the Iron Reapers and the gangs they fought against. The club had rules, a code. They didn't kill unless absolutely necessary. They protected the innocent and punished the guilty, but they didn't become monsters to fight monsters. One more thing, Sledge said, his voice softening slightly. Some of you have families. Kids. If you want to sit this one out, no judgment. This is my fight, my old teacher they went after. I don't expect. Shut up, Sledge, Hangman interrupted, grinning. Your fight is our fight. That's what the patch means, right? We're brothers. And brothers don't let brothers stand alone. Around the table, heads nodded. Fists pounded on oak. The decision was made, the course set. All right then, Sledge said, standing. Get some rest. We roll out at 2:30 a.m. And brothers. He met each man's eyes in turn. Thank you. For backing me. For standing with me. For proving that Mr. Henderson was right to believe in me all those years ago. The meeting broke up, men filtering out to prepare for what was coming. Sledge stayed behind, alone in the church, staring at the memorial wall. At the faces of brothers who'd fallen over the years. At the words of the creed they'd all sworn to uphold. Tomorrow, he'd honor that creed. Tomorrow, he'd show Viper and anyone else watching that the Iron Reapers weren't just a motorcycle club. They were the guardians of a neighborhood that deserved better than fear and fire. Tomorrow, justice would ride on chrome and thunder. The next morning, at 2:30 a.m. exactly, 50 motorcycles assembled in the parking lot of an abandoned factory 3 blocks from Serpent's Denver. No headlights, just the glow of cigarettes and the low rumble of idling engines. Sledge addressed his crew one final time before they moved out. Remember the mission. In and out, minimal damage to property, maximum impact on morale. We're not here to trash the place. We're here to send a message and gather intelligence. Gears gets into their computers and finds evidence of illegal operations. We find Carlos and anyone else involved in the arson. We make it clear that Arthur Henderson is under our protection, and anyone who touches him answers to us. The men nodded, adjusting their gloves, checking their weapons. Chains wrapped around fists, baseball bats tucked into bike bags, brass knuckles gleaming dully in the moonlight. They rolled out in formation, engines kept low and quiet. It was a surreal sight, 50 bikers moving through empty city streets like a mechanized ghost army, visible only by starlight and the occasional street lamp. Serpent's Den sat on a corner lot, all black glass and neon that had been shut off for the night. According to Reaper's intelligence, Viper himself wasn't there. He was at his house in the suburbs, probably sleeping peacefully, secure in the belief that his money and connections made him untouchable. He was about to learn differently. Sledge raised his fist, and the bikes fell silent, coasting to a stop in a semicircle around the building. Diesel moved forward with his lockpicking kit, but Gears stopped him. Don't bother. Fire exit on the east side has a faulty sensor, been broken for weeks. They've been propping it open with a brick so the smokers can get back in. Sure enough, the door was exactly as described. The Iron Reapers filed in quietly, moving through the darkened hallway with the practiced efficiency of men who'd done this kind of thing before. The club's interior was exactly what you'd expect from a drug-dealing operation masquerading as legitimate business. Expensive but tasteless, all chrome and black leather, with VIP booths elevated so the important people could look down on everyone else. Behind the bar, top-shelf liquor that probably got watered down before serving. In the back offices, probably ledgers that didn't match reality and safes full of cash that would never see a tax form. 2 security guards sat in the main area, watching football highlights on their phones. They looked up just as Sledge stepped into view, and their faces went from bored to terrified in half a second. Don't move, Sledge said quietly. Don't make a sound. Don't reach for your radios or your phones. Just sit there and think about how much Viper is paying you, and whether it's enough to die for. The guards wisely chose to sit very, very still. Gears moved past them toward the office, USB drive in hand. Diesel started checking doors, mapping out the layout. The rest of the crew spread through the building, looking for Carlos or any of Viper's known associates. They found Carlos in a back room, counting money with another man, probably Memo, the second arsonist. Both men looked up as the door burst open, and suddenly the room was full of very large, very angry bikers. Carlos Mendez, Sledge said, stepping forward. You and I need to have a conversation about fires. Carlos bolted, tried to run, got about 3 steps before chains clotheslined him, sending him crashing to the ground. Memo put his hands up immediately, wisely choosing survival over loyalty. Please, man, we were just following orders. Viper said. Viper said what? Sledge loomed over them, all 6'5" and 240 of controlled menace. Viper said to burn an old man's car? To nearly kill him? That what Viper said. We didn't know anyone was inside. We were just supposed to torch the car, send a message. A message about what? Carlos, still gasping from Chain's hit, looked up with pure terror in his eyes. About respect. About territory. Rico said you and your crew jumped him, said you were trying to take over Viper's business. Viper wanted to show you that you can't push us around. Sledge looked at Reaper, who shook his head in disgust. So Rico lied. Told Viper we jumped them, when really we stopped them from robbing an innocent man. Seems that way. Sledge pulled out his phone and started recording. Carlos, I want you to tell me exactly what Viper ordered you to do. Every detail. And I want you to tell me where to find Rico. What followed was a confession that would make any prosecutor weep with joy. Carlos, terrified of spending the rest of his life in a wheelchair, spilled everything. The arson, Viper's other operations, the locations of stash houses, the names of dirty cops on the payroll. Memo added details Carlos forgot, each man trying to outdo the other in cooperation. Meanwhile, Gears was having similar success in the office. Viper's computer security was laughably bad. Apparently being feared by everyone made you sloppy. Within 20 minutes, Gears had access to everything. Shipment schedules, financial records, photographs of operations, communications with suppliers. Got enough here to put Viper away for 20 years, Gears reported. And about 6 of his cops, too. Download it all, Sledge ordered. Multiple copies. We're going to need leverage. While the tech work continued, other crew members were redecorating Serpent's Denver. Not trashing it. That would be juvenile. Instead, they were leaving very specific messages. Photos of Arthur's burned car taped to Viper's office door. The club's symbol spray-painted with washable paint. They weren't vandals. On the wall behind the bar. And in the VIP booth where Viper usually sat, a single playing card, the ace of spades, with a note attached. You made this personal when you touched one of ours. We can reach you anywhere, anytime. We can take everything you've built and reduce it to ashes. The only question is whether you're smart enough to walk away before we do. You have 48 hours to leave our neighborhood and never come back. This is your only warning. Iron Reapers MC. All right, Sledge called out. We've got what we came for. Let's go. The crew filed out as quietly as they'd entered, leaving behind 2 terrified arsonists zip-tied to chairs and 2 security guards who would spend the rest of their careers checking over their shoulders. Outside, the bikes fired up in sequence, a rolling thunder that echoed through the empty streets. They didn't rush, didn't scatter like criminals. They rode in formation, proud and public, back to their clubhouse. They had evidence. They had leverage. They had Viper's entire operation mapped and documented. Now came the interesting part. Viper received the news at 6:37 a.m., when his head of security called in a panic to report the break-in. By the time Viper arrived at Serpent's Den, the sun was up and the full scope of the Iron Reaper's message was clear. They didn't steal anything? Viper asked, staring at the playing card. Not a dollar. Just left that. His security chief, a former cop named Morrison, looked shaken. Boss, Carlos and Memo sang like canaries. They told the bikers everything. And someone hacked your computer, downloaded files, probably made copies. Viper's hand clenched around the card so hard it crumpled. Find them. Find Sledge and his entire crew. I want to know where they live, where they shop, where they get their bikes serviced. I want to know everything. Boss, maybe we should. Maybe we should what? Viper's voice went deadly quiet. Back down. Run. Let a bunch of bikers make me look weak in front of my people. He threw the card across the room. No. We escalate. If they want war, we'll give them war. Over the next 24 hours, Viper made calls. To his suppliers, asking for enforcers. To his connections in other gangs, looking for hired guns. To his tame police officers, demanding they harass any Iron Reaper they found. He was so focused on preparing for war that he didn't notice what the Iron Reapers were actually doing. While Viper gathered his forces, Sledge was making different calls. To the FBI field office, where an agent named Sarah Chun had been trying to build a case against Viper for years. To the DEA, who were very interested in Viper's cartel connections. To the local news, who were always hungry for a story about corruption in the police department. And to a certain retired teacher's hospital room, where Arthur Henderson was recovering nicely. Mr. Henderson, how are you feeling? Better than yesterday. The doctors say I can go home tomorrow. Arthur's voice was stronger, though he still looked tired. Axel, please tell me you didn't do anything rash. Define rash. Anything that involves violence, property damage, or headline news. Sledge smiled. Then I can honestly say I haven't done anything rash. We had a conversation with some people, gathered some information, made our position clear. Very peaceful, very civilized. Arthur didn't look convinced. And these people you had a conversation with, they're going to leave me alone now. They're going to leave this entire neighborhood alone. Permanently. Sledge pulled up a chair. Sir, I need to tell you something. The man who ordered the attack on you is named Vincent Morales. He goes by Viper, runs a drug operation out of a club on the east side. One of his cousins lied to him about what happened the other night, claimed we jumped them for no reason. Viper wanted revenge. So it really was because of you protecting me. No, sir. It was because Viper is a predator who thinks violence is the answer to everything. The fact that you got caught in the middle is on him, not you. Sledge leaned forward. But here's the thing. We have evidence now. Financial records, shipping manifests, communications. Enough to put Viper and his whole operation away for decades. We're turning it over to the FBI this afternoon. Arthur's eyes widened. The FBI? Turns out several federal agencies have been investigating Viper for years. They just needed evidence they could use in court. Well, now they have it. Sledge's smile turned grim. By this time tomorrow, Viper's going to have much bigger problems than a motorcycle club. He'll be fighting federal charges, cartel bosses who think he's a liability, and cops who suddenly don't want to be associated with him. You did all this in one night. I had help. Sledge pulled out his phone and showed Arthur a photo of the assembled Iron Reapers, all 50 of them standing in front of the clubhouse. These are my brothers, sir. Every one of them showed up when I said someone hurt you. Every one of them was ready to stand with me. Consequences be damned. Because that's what you taught me. That standing together makes us stronger than we could ever be alone. Arthur stared at the photo, his eyes misty. They look terrifying. They are. But they're also the best men I know. Loyal, honorable, willing to put themselves on the line for what's right. Sledge put the phone away. You taught me that being strong isn't about being the biggest or the meanest. It's about using your strength to protect people who can't protect themselves. That's what we do, sir. That's what the Iron Reapers stand for. Before Arthur could respond, there was a knock at the door. A nurse poked her head in. Mr. Henderson? You have more visitors. Emma, Arthur's granddaughter, came in holding a birthday card she'd made herself, her parents behind her. She ran to her grandfather's bedside, chattering about how she'd been so worried and how she'd made him a special card to help him feel better. Sledge stood to leave, but Arthur caught his hand. Axel, wait. I want you to meet my family. He made introductions, explaining that Sledge was a former student who'd helped him. Emma looked up at this massive, scary-looking biker and asked, with the brutal honesty of an 8-year-old, "Are you a good guy or a bad guy?" Sledge crouched down to her level. That's a complicated question. I've done things I'm not proud of, but I try to be good, especially to people who deserve it. And your grandpa? He's one of the best people I know. So I'm going to make sure nobody ever hurts him again. Okay, Emma said, apparently satisfied with this answer. Do you want to sign my grandpa's card? So Sledge, president of the Iron Reapers MC, enforcer, fighter, a man who'd put 3 people in the hospital in the last 24 hours, signed an 8-year-old's get-well card with a purple crayon, right under a drawing of a flower. Later, as he was leaving, Arthur's son-in-law stopped him in the hallway. Mr. Thorne, I just wanted to say thank you for being there when Dad needed you. For everything. Just paying forward what he did for me. Dad said you were one of his success stories. A kid who could have gone either way, but chose the right path. Sledge laughed softly. With all due respect to your father-in-law, I'm not sure everyone would say I chose the right path. But it's my path, and it's one where I get to protect people like him. So I call that a win. The FBI raid on Serpent's Den happened at 4:37 p.m. that afternoon, coordinated with DEA and local police, the honest ones, anyway. By 6 p.m., Viper was in federal custody, facing charges that included drug trafficking, money laundering, conspiracy, and enough other counts to ensure he'd never see freedom again. But Sledge wasn't satisfied with just the legal victory. He wanted Viper to understand, on a personal level, what happened when you threatened innocent people in Iron Reaper territory. He made sure to be at the courthouse when Viper was arraigned, sitting in the back row of the gallery, impossible to miss. When Viper was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs, his eyes found Sledge immediately. The look of rage and fear on Viper's face was everything Sledge had hoped for. After the arraignment, Sledge made one more stop. Rico's apartment, a 4th-floor walk-up in a building that should have been condemned years ago. He knocked politely, waited. Rico opened the door, saw Sledge, and immediately tried to slam it shut. Sledge's boot stopped it cold. We need to talk, Sledge said, pushing his way inside. I didn't mean for it to go that far. Rico backed away, hands up. I just wanted Viper to help us get back at you guys. I didn't know he'd try to kill the old man. But you lied to him. Told him we jumped you for no reason. That we were trying to take over his territory. I was embarrassed. You humiliated me in front of my crew. You were robbing an innocent man. You were going to beat him for fun. You got exactly what you deserved. Sledge pulled out his phone. But here's the thing, Rico. I'm giving you a choice. See, I've got your confession to the attempted robbery. I've got security footage. I've got everything I need to put you away for aggravated assault, attempted robbery, elder abuse. Rico's face went white. Please, man, I can't go to prison. Or, Sledge continued, you can watch this. He played the video from the hospital. Arthur in his bed, talking to his granddaughter. Emma showing him her card. The family gathered around, grateful that he'd survived. That man you tried to rob? That's Arthur Henderson. He was a teacher. My teacher. And he spent his career helping kids like you. Kids who'd made mistakes, who'd chosen the wrong path. He believed everyone deserved a second chance. Sledge pocketed the phone. So here's your second chance. You turn yourself into the police. You testify against Viper. You tell them everything. About the robbery, about lying to your cousin, about the arson. You cooperate fully. They'll kill me in prison. Probably. Or you can ask for protective custody. Witness protection. Whatever deal you can make. Sledge leaned in close. But if you run, if you don't show up at that police station by tomorrow morning, then I'm releasing all this evidence to the cops anyway. And you'll go down for everything, with no chance at a deal. That's not fair. No, what's not fair is a 72-year-old man having a heart attack because you were too chicken shit to admit you got beat. Sledge stood to his full height. 24 hours, Rico. Do the right thing, and maybe, Maybe you come out of this with a shred of dignity intact. He left Rico trembling in his apartment, knowing that by morning, the kid would either be at the police station or on a bus to nowhere. Either way, he wouldn't be a problem anymore. Over the next week, the effects of the Iron Reaper's intervention rippled through the neighborhood like waves from a stone dropped in still water. Viper's arrest made the news, not just local, but regional. The story had everything: corruption, drugs, arson, a motorcycle club playing vigilante. The press ate it up, and suddenly everyone was talking about how the Iron Reapers had taken down a major criminal operation. Some of the coverage was positive. Local MC helps FBI bust drug ring. Some was critical. Motorcycle gang takes law into own hands. But all of it sent a message to anyone paying attention. The Iron Reapers protected their territory, and crossing them had consequences. Rico did turn himself in, testimony and all. The district attorney, sensing an opportunity for good publicity, offered him a reduced sentence in exchange for his cooperation. He'd serve 5 years instead of 20, in a minimum security facility with protective custody. It was more than he deserved, in Sledge's opinion, but it was something. The corrupt cops who'd been on Viper's payroll were quietly transferred to desk duty pending internal investigations. 2 resigned rather than face charges. The department's PR person made statements about rooting out corruption and maintaining public trust. Business on the streets returned to normal, or rather, a better version of normal. The dealers who'd worked for Viper either found legitimate employment or moved to different neighborhoods. The protection racket stopped. The street-level violence that had been creeping into the area evaporated like morning mist. People noticed. Mrs. Chun, the neighbor who'd tried to fight Arthur's car fire with her garden hose, stopped Sledge one afternoon as he was riding past her house. "Mr. Thorne," she called out, waving him down. "I wanted to thank you for what you did, for Arthur, and for all of us." Sledge killed his engine and removed his helmet. "Just doing what's right, ma'am." "Well, it's appreciated. We were all so scared after what happened to Arthur. Scared it would happen to us next." She smiled. "But then you and your friends took care of it. You made us feel safe again. That's the goal, Mrs. Chun. This is our neighborhood too. We live here, work here. We've got just as much invested in keeping it safe as anyone else." Other neighbors echoed the sentiment. The owner of the corner store, who'd been paying protection money to Viper's thugs, sent a basket of fruit to the clubhouse as thanks. The elementary school principal, who'd been dealing with dealers setting up near the playground, wrote a letter to the local paper praising the Iron Reaper's community involvement. Not everyone was happy, of course. Some people still saw the club as dangerous, as criminals playing at being heroes. The police were particularly conflicted, grateful that Viper was off the streets, but uncomfortable with a motorcycle club doing their job for them. But Sledge didn't do it for recognition or praise. He did it because Arthur Henderson had once looked at an angry, damaged teenager and seen potential instead of problems, had believed in him when nobody else would, had taught him that strength without honor was just bullying, but strength with purpose could change the world. 2 weeks later, Arthur Henderson came home from the hospital to find a surprise in his driveway. Where the burned-out Buick had sat, there was now a pristine Honda Accord. Only 3 years old, low mileage, the kind of reliable sedan a retired teacher could afford to maintain. The title was in his name, the insurance already paid for a full year. Attached to the steering wheel was a card. "Mr. Henderson, you taught me that debts of gratitude can never be fully repaid, only paid forward. This is us trying anyway. We took up a collection. Every member of the club chipped in. This car isn't as fancy as some, but it's safe, reliable, and it's yours. Thank you for believing in a kid nobody else wanted. Thank you for showing me that strength means protecting the weak, not preying on them. Thank you for being the teacher I needed, even when I was too dumb to appreciate it. Respectfully, the Iron Reaper's MC." Arthur stood in his driveway, tears running down his weathered cheeks, reading the card over and over. His son-in-law helped him into the driver's seat, and together they explored the features, the backup camera, the Bluetooth stereo, the safety ratings that made it one of the most reliable cars on the road. "Dad," his son-in-law said quietly, "that motorcycle club of yours, there's something else." "They're good men," Arthur said firmly. "Different from what you'd expect, maybe, but good, in the ways that matter most." The next day was Emma's birthday party. Arthur had promised her that bicycle with the pink streamers, and he'd kept his word. He rolled it out to the backyard where the party was in full swing, and Emma's squeal of delight was worth every penny. But midway through the party, there was an unexpected visitor. Sledge rolled up on his motorcycle, carrying a wrapped present and looking distinctly uncomfortable in the suburban birthday party setting. He was wearing his cut, of course, he always wore his colors, but he'd cleaned up, combed his beard, tried to look less terrifying. Emma recognized him immediately and ran over. "You're the biker who helped Grandpa." "That's right. I heard it was your birthday, so I brought you something." He handed her the present. Inside was a bicycle helmet, top of the line, rated for maximum safety, covered in glittering pink stars. "Wow." Emma immediately put it on, adjusting the straps. "Look, Mommy. It sparkles." Her mother approached cautiously. "Mr. Thorne, you didn't have to." "I wanted to," Sledge said simply. "Your father-in-law, he's special to me. And anyone important to him is important to us." He pulled out another, smaller package. "This is for Mr. Henderson." Arthur opened it to find a framed photograph. The Iron Reapers MC, all 50 members, standing in front of their clubhouse. And at the bottom, a brass plaque with an inscription. "In honor of Arthur Henderson, teacher, mentor, friend, who taught us that strength serves, not enslaves. Iron Reapers MC." Arthur's hands trembled as he read it. "Axel, this is... I don't know what to say. Say you'll hang it somewhere you'll see it. So you remember that the work you did mattered. That the kids you helped went on to do good things, in our own way." Sledge glanced around at the party, at the normal suburban happiness. "This is what I fight for, Mr. Henderson. This. Kids having birthday parties. Families feeling safe. People being able to live their lives without fear." "Like Thermopylae," Arthur said softly. "Like Thermopylae," Sledge agreed. "Standing the ground that matters." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching Emma show off her new helmet to her friends, listening to the laughter and music of a child's birthday party on a peaceful suburban afternoon. "You know," Arthur said eventually, "of all my students over the years, and I taught thousands, you're the one I'm most proud of. Not because you're the most successful, or the richest, or the most famous, but because you remembered what really matters. You took the anger that could have destroyed you and turned it into something that protects others. I had a good teacher, and you turned out to be a good student. Just took you a while to do your homework." They both laughed at that, the old teacher and his former student, bound together by lessons that went deeper than any textbook could teach. As the party wound down and Sledge prepared to leave, Emma ran up one more time. "Are you coming to my next birthday?" Sledge looked at Arthur, who nodded encouragingly. "If your grandpa says it's okay, then yeah, I'd like that. And can you bring your motorcycle friends? Some of them looked nice in that picture." "We're not that nice, kiddo. We're pretty scary." Emma considered this seriously, then shook her head. "Nah, Grandpa says you're good guys. And Grandpa's the smartest person I know. So you must be good guys." After Sledge left, Arthur's son pulled him aside. "Dad, I have to ask. That biker, Sledge, what exactly did you do for him back when he was your student?" Arthur thought about it. About the angry 15-year-old who'd sat in his classroom, bruised and defiant, and convinced the world had nothing good to offer. About the conversations after school, the essay about the Spartans, the attendance records he'd fudged to keep the boy from being expelled. About seeing potential where others saw only problems. "I believed in him," Arthur said simply, when nobody else would. And apparently, that was enough. 3 months later, Viper was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 35 years in federal prison. His entire operation was dismantled, his assets seized, his corruption network exposed and prosecuted. The neighborhood around Birch Street became one of the safest in the city, with crime rates dropping by 60%. The Iron Reapers maintained a visible presence, not as intimidation, but as protection. They sponsored youth programs, mediated disputes, and made it clear that predators weren't welcome. Arthur Henderson recovered fully from his heart attack and lived to see Emma graduate high school. At her graduation, sitting in the audience, was a contingent of Iron Reapers MC members, their colors proudly displayed, there to honor the teacher who'd changed one of their lives and, through him, changed all of theirs. The Spartans at Thermopylae had stood their ground and died defending what mattered. The Iron Reapers, taught by a retired history teacher, learned to stand their ground and live, protecting their community, defending the defenseless, proving that strength with honor could change the world one act of justice at a time. And somewhere, Arthur Henderson smiled, knowing that his most challenging student had learned the most important lesson of all, that the best way to honor those who helped you rise is to reach back and help others do the same. Stand firm. Stand together. Stand for those who cannot stand alone.